and welcome to BigJollyPolitics.com and our 2014 Republican primary candidate interviews. I'm David Jennings, and today I'll be talking to Chuck Maricle. Chuck is running for the open seat in Texas House District 129 to replace longtime Rep. John Davis, who is not seeking re-election. HD 129 covers Clear Lake, Seabrook, Shore Acres, Taylor Lake Village, and parts of Friendswood, LaPorte, and Pearland, and probably some I missed. HD 129 also happens to be my home district, so naturally I'm very interested in this race. Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Dave. How you doing? Thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, anytime, man. It's high time for political season right now, isn't it?
Oh, it sure has started already. If you think about all the clubs and the meetings and the events you have to go to between now and the primary, it's good in one way. It's good that we get out to the community, we get to meet with people, we get to sit down and understand what the issues are. But at the same time, it's a lot of stress on the family and the work. So this is just the reality of politics. This is a commitment we make.
Absolutely, and it's a big commitment for you and your family. So, on that note, why don't we just take a couple of minutes, 4, 5, 10, 15, whatever, and introduce yourself to our viewers. You know, some of your background, where you grew up, what schools you went to, are you married, do you have children, your career. I know you have a long career in the military. So, why don't you just tell us about yourself?
Well, I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. And I want you to understand I lived in Texas for over 25 years. In fact, I have lived here longer than I've ever lived any place in my life, and probably within 3 miles of the location where I am right now in the Sagevine area. So I've been in the Sagevine area of Houston for probably 25 years, 3 months, I think, is what I put down on my campaign forms the other day when I actually did the math on that. But being born and raised in Buffalo, my parents were both high school teachers. So I was born in an education family. We had principals, teachers, people in different various parts of education. So I grew up in kind of the school environment, the education environment, in a very blue-collar industrial city up in the Great Lakes. So you have a different perspective, I think, on a lot of things when you grew up in a heavy manufacturing, heavy blue-collar, kind of an environment. Personally, from my perspective, when I went to school, I'm a product of Catholic private education, the best way I can phrase it. I went to a Christian Brothers High School, St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute in Buffalo, New York, college preparatory school, followed by a Jesuit college. So I was pretty well trained by Jesuits, where I received my undergraduate degrees in computer science and physics. Was directly commissioned into the U.S. Army from that point, spent the next 10 years as a U.S. Army officer. Coming out of that, I went to work for defense contractors, pretty typical, right? I went to work for McDonnell Douglas, General Motors, GM Hughes Electronics, a good engineering career with both those companies. And General Motors gave me an offer one day as I went to the Hughes aircraft side and said, hey, we're going to promote you. I said, that's fantastic. You're engineering manager, but we have one problem. We're going to move you. Where do you want to go? Well, you've got two choices. You can go to Chicago or you can go to Houston.
Hey, at least they gave you a choice.
Let me think about that for all of about 2 seconds. Let me see. Palm trees, mild winters, and no state income tax. Those are the three very important decision points in that process. So I came down to Houston. I had been working for the last several years actually in Detroit. I was an engineer for General Motors at the Cadillac plant, working in GM powertrain for GM Hughes. And when they promoted me, they pulled me out of the plant and factory environment, and I ended up down here working telecommunications design for basically the shuttle project. Rockwell, back in the days, so when we used to run Gemini, when we used to know it as Rockwell. McDonnell Douglas, of course, I did a lot of work at the Corpus Christi Army Depot, for example. So I was involved in a lot of defense and aerospace contracting telecommunications projects, which was really kind of my background. During that time with General Motors for those 10 years, even continuing all the way up to 1988, they had the opportunity to send me to some graduates. We have an executive program with GM where I did some work in expert systems and factory automation design, which resulted in my doctoral work, which ultimately was published by the Journal of Supercomputing. So I was rather proud of that little fact. Came out of General Motors. I had some opportunities with some startup companies, which I decided to kind of go to the startup route. Went for a number of technology startups before I got involved in my own business. So I was working for companies like, you probably wouldn't know actually, a company like, I was working in Japan for a company called Paltech Corporation, big semiconductor design company. I was vice president of product development for them. The technology that we call ADSL or DSL technology, I was one of the design engineers in many of the companies that designed those original products. Coming out of that as well, I went to a little company here in Houston and helped Mr. Lee Cook start Phonoscope Communications. So I was the gentleman who helped Lee start the super high-speed fiber optic data network phonoscope communication. I spent a few years with Lee, and then went on to a number of startups again, got involved with some venture capital boards. And then post 9/11, again working for the Japanese company, when everybody's world kind of changed, I found myself looking for what I was going to do next. So I ended up starting my own business. Fundamentally, I was doing medical product design. I have a background in laser technology. So I started designing medical lasers for a few different companies, and in the process, actually acquired 4 patents in laser technology, and a company around it called Axis, which is my wife and daughter's name spelled backwards. Funny enough, people try to read so much into it. It's like, no, 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 it's just my wife and daughter's name spelled backwards. Spelled backwards, AIXIZ. Which about 10 years ago, which has grown into a very profitable, very good family-owned business for us. My wife Shab is from China, and we were married, we'll be 11 years now. I'm very happy to say. She had a daughter from her first marriage as well, who also came over from China. Kind of an immigration success story in a lot of ways. My wife came here legally, I will point out, from China on a visa with $2,000 in her pocket, and on her own within 6 years had her own business, had bought a new house, and had done very well in the community. You know, it just shows you how the legal immigration process in fact does work. Her daughter, my stepdaughter, came from China as well, not understanding English, and she now serves with the U.S. Navy as a Navy officer, a Navy nuclear officer on the USS McCampbell in the Pacific Ocean right now. I believe heading to the Philippines right now for relief effort. So it shows you, you can be from anywhere in the world and succeed in this country. We also have another company, my wife's business, called XK Sports. My wife also plays professional racquetball. So we designed a whole series of products around automatic serving machines for tennis and racquetball and soccer. So we have a whole sporting goods product line as well with a separate company that she runs. It's a lot of fun. We've had a good ride with it. It's been a really good time. But in the middle of that, we have the military portion of this thing. So while we're busy doing all this, of course, I came out as an Army officer, but I've been in uniform in this country for roughly about 33 years now. I also embedded myself when I came here with the U.S. Coast Guard, specifically with the auxiliary forces. Many people don't really realize that the 50% of the U.S. Coast Guard is basically the uniform volunteer component, which what I'm responsible for. We're kind of like the volunteer fire department of the U.S. Coast Guard, probably the best way I can phrase it, in a lot of different ways. So we conduct all the active missions, with the exception of active law enforcement of the U.S. Coast Guard. So I'm responsible as a district captain for 4 divisions, roughly 1,000 personnel, stretching from New Orleans all the way to Freeport, Texas, and all the way north of Amarillo. Another side thing I get involved with too is I also been a firearms instructor for many years. I've been a National Rifle Association firearms instructor, as well as a Texas concealed handgun license instructor for many years. So I'm very active in the shooting community. Also very active regarding military issues in the state of Texas regarding firearms, concealed handgun licensing, and I go all the way back to the beginning. Some of your viewers might recognize names like Jan Coffey and Star Riddle. Those people, right. They would know those folks. Very involved with the gun community, especially regarding military families. So we've been able to do some very good work with that. And so here I am. Here we go.
Here you are. That sounds that sounds like a very busy life, Chuck. I'll tell you. I just got to say, with the volunteer work and your different companies. So I guess the next question is, if you're so busy with that, why in the heck? What draws you to politics? Have you held office before? Have you studied it? Have you run for office? I mean, why would you want to get involved in politics at this time?
Well, there's 2 different portions of this. I think that, and it's very common, I believe, I'm 53 years old, and I think it's very common for professionals, maybe over the age of 50, who've had some level of success. They get to a point in their lives where they want to, in one way, give back to the community. I mean, they want to get involved. I mean, when you've had the stability of family and the stability of work, you want to get involved in what good you could do with the community. This has caused me through the years of my businesses to be very active with, for example, with the South Bend Ellington Chamber, and now with the Clear Lake Chambers of Commerce, involved in a number of their charity events. But even prefacing that, I was very involved and continue to be. I was the legislative liaison, the government liaison committee for the U.S. Coast Guard to the Texas State Capitol. So I was involved for a number of years with the voting law administrators and voting law administration and the bills that would come through the State House and the State Senate. So anytime a voting law came up in the state of Texas for consideration by a committee, I was very involved in that process, representing the U.S. Coast Guard's official positions on maritime issues. So I got to know a number of people, specifically one individual that I became very close to, and I met him when he was running in his primary, Ken Legler, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Ken and I bonded in a lot of ways. Actually, I brought Ken into the Coast Guard, which was really kind of funny how that worked out. And he brought me into the state capitol. So it was a nice combination of things. And when you see people like Ken that were very dedicated, very active, very deeply committed to the constituency, and really believed what they said, and you saw the efforts that he did, it gives you a sense of, this is something I really would like to do with the community. I saw how we interacted, I saw how we was involved, I saw sincerity level, and it gives you a positive aspect of the legislature, and it gives you a positive aspect of the number of the people you meet in there. When I got involved with the voting law administration issues and efforts, and even some work I did with some gun issues, CHL issues, I found out through the years, through maybe 6-7 years, how things get done in Austin, and how things function, and the good that can actually come out of that place. So Ken actually was my first campaign manager, interestingly enough, when I ran in 2012 for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 1. Now, I will be honest, and with all respect to the people out there, I knew the situation with that race, obviously, but we knew what the story was. But I am still proud of the fact that I drew as many votes as I did. I drew in excess of 60,000 votes, and I think that was a good accomplishment, given that race. But having worked with the Republican clubs and getting exposed to the organizations at that point, what I learned was the importance of outreach and working, with the minority communities. I have a biracial family. My wife is Chinese. I have a son, a 10-year-old son as well, besides my daughter. And, so I know a lot of the issues regarding immigration, regarding immigrants' attitudes, and specifically regarding minority communities' look and attitudes towards the Republican Party. So I spent a lot of time in the outreach aspect, going to neighborhoods with people like Sean Siebert, and I would go out into the Heights. I would go out into the 3rd and the 4th Ward. I'd be out in the Sunnyside trying to connect. So from the Republican Party perspective, we really get into a mode of how we reach out with these people, and the level of sincerity and the things that I know we can do that are good for this community. So all those things combined, in my education, my master's degree in politics, if you will, by running for Commissioner Precinct 1, has really, continues to motivate and draw me towards this particular race in 129. Now, we know the 129 race originally was 144, but with redistricting, this is where we are today.
Right, and that brings the question, of course, why 129, and then beyond the why of 129, other than probably your residency here, why the state rep level, but again, what are the biggest challenges that you see in front of the district itself? So why 129? Why the state rep district? And then what are the challenges that you see facing it, and what are your solutions for them?
Well, there's a number of challenges in this district, and I think the first thing that comes to mind, frankly, is let's talk about 129 just for a minute. 129, and even when you did your introduction, 129 typically was a Clear Lake focused area. But with the redistricting, we've inherited the area where I particularly live, up by Dobie High School. So up here, this is a predominantly purple to blue area. If we look in the world, and we look at the world of Clear Lake, and we have wonderful people like Phil Sandland, Jack Mormon, Louis Ditta. We can look at all of our elected officials down that way. When you come over west of the Gulf Freeway, it's the land of Chris Diaz, Joanne Delgado, and El Franco Lee. So the first thing that you have to understand when you're running in District 129 these days, it's about teamwork and it's about partnership. And I spend a lot of time with people I also spend as equal time with Joanne Delgado and Chris Diaz as I would with Phil Sandlin and Louis Ditta, because you have to understand that the focus on the District 129 is not just the traditional base that we're used to dealing with anymore. So it very much is you're not a Democrat, you're not a Republican. We have an issue with the district that we have to solve together as a team. And I get concerned because when I see people out there today, it's like one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs, Momentary Lapse of Reason. we see that today, though. We see that out there today. We see people arguing positions and issues that have absolutely nothing to do with the relevancy of the district and the people. Is we talk about Clear Creek School District, but at the same time, you have to remember up here it's Pasadena ISD, and these are things that don't get mentioned in a lot of the conversations. I belong to the South Belt Chamber, and I've reached out to people like Bob Mitchell, the Barry Economic Group, and I now member the Clear Lake Chamber, and I work with the economic development people, and yet I don't see a lot of outreach coming back the other way. So you have to appreciate what it really takes now to run a hybrid area such as this. It takes more than just a Republican and even a highly conservative-centric focused individual. You have to be able to work on both sides with a very, very wide group of people. And that's the lesson that I learned, frankly, in the 2012 race. Now, if we're talking about, let's talk about what are the three key issues with 129. There are more than this. David, I will grant you that.
Well, we have to focus somewhere.
But let's focus on three areas. The first thing I want to focus on is basic economic development. The three biggest economic engines that drive this district, and 129 is the epicenter for all three of these things, is the Port of Houston, Johnson Space Center, and Arlington Field. Everybody who works here, everybody who has a small business here, everybody who's employed here is either directly or indirectly or 2 to 3 levels down directly affected by one of those locations. All three of those key areas have been greatly affected by the federal government since 2008. Let's start with the port. I have the opportunity to sit on a couple port committees. I'm very fortunate. I'm very heavily involved because of my other affiliations with the Port of Houston. So I work with the Bill Deals and other people in the world and Chad Burks quite a bit in the economic development side. We have a problem with the Port of Houston. And the problem with the Port of Houston is, for all its grandeur and glory, and Joe Biden coming down here this week and everybody's rolling their eyes in their head over that one, we're not properly funded to maintain the port. We talk about expansion coming out of the Panama Canal, which is going to be about a 15 to 20% bump for us in container traffic, we believe. But yet we have an environment where we can't maintain the ship channel depth. It's getting narrower, it's getting shallower, and what takes us $60 million a year to maintain is we're only getting $23 to $25 million a year of funding. This has been going on for a very long time. So the port communities ask me, hey, state representative or potential state representative, what can you do for us at the state level to give us a greater control over the future of the port? Whether it's the Port of Houston, the Houston Port Authority, the economic development people, we have people out there right now trying to put together teams of companies to do their own maintenance on the ship channel because it's not getting done. 1 out of every 5 products that comes into the United States comes through the Port of Houston. And this is extremely important for people to understand how big this area is. We are one of the only ports that's a net exporter. All that fracking work that's going on up in the northeast and northern parts of the United States, all those rail cars with that product come down to the Port of Houston and get offloaded and shipped overseas as an export product from this location right here. But if we can't maintain the port, if we have to run ships that are less full, the economics change. And this is a huge problem. There's a secondary economic issue with this as well. And this is a problem with the state in general right now. Economic development. I mean, you would think that we would have people involved in local economic development involved in Austin. Fact of the matter is, if they put together 2 years ago or a year ago one of those blue ribbon panel commissions talking about economic development for the ship channel and the petrochemical industries. The problem was Louisiana can process permitting for somebody to invest in their state in 6 weeks, and it takes us a year to a year and a half. I have seen documented where we've lost in excess of $35 billion in business because of our inefficiency in the state. Industry wants a bulldog to basically take charge, so when a lead comes in, to take responsibility for making sure the processes flow, the right people get the information, and we don't go back and forth between the local and economic development people in the state of Texas trying to get something done. We are losing significant business over that because of our inefficiency. So the Blue Ribbon Panel goes out there and does a best practices study. They go all over the world. And I'm not going to tell you who was on that panel. Let's just say to suffice, nothing ever happened.
Right.
Okay? Because they did not involve the people. They had the key play and the influence in the port and its operations. So they are looking for somebody who's an advocate, who understands the port and its issues, understands economic development, and will be willing to listen to a team of those people to bring prosperity. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you right now, this all exists within District 129. This is our backyard. I cannot begin to tell you how huge this is in this area.
Yeah, I think Boy, you hit on something that's extremely critical that I haven't really heard other people discussing thus far. Wow. Well, tell us about your endorsements thus far.
Well, actually, I apologize, David. I got two other issues. That was actually issue one. If you would give me permission to talk about two other little sides.
Hey, go right on.
The second problem we have is education. It's not education necessarily in the way you would think about it. We've got some issues. For example, we have middle schools and high schools busting at the seams right now. Okay. Now, how we're handling education is fundamentally, we have some fundamental education issues, whether it's administration or how we're managing the schools. That's an issue we have to talk about. But the bigger issue is when I talk to the economic people and I talk to the people who give me the jobs reports that I see in these board meetings, they're telling me that I'm going to have 110,000 positions to fill, okay? Specifically, that could be filled by people in our local area over the next 4 years. We have $35 billion in committed oil company, chemical company construction projects on the Port of Houston and in 129. Committed money. Where are we going to get these people to fill these jobs? Industry has told us, they said, you know what, if you can't fill these jobs, we're going to bring people in from overseas to do it. We have a golden opportunity to drop unemployment down to an historic, like North Dakota down here, that kind of level. The schools need help. Industry needs to step up with the education process. I've already partnered with the New Pasadena High School, Technology High School, with the Coast Guard for some specialized maritime training. People like Bob Mitchell doing maritime education programs he started in some of these Houston schools. People like Sarah Jennings, who are actually doing the maritime education for San Jack. People like myself who have been involved with the Maritime Youth Expo, connecting industry to schools to even 8-year-olds to get them involved in these careers. But it needs to go wider. It needs to be involved. It needs to be involved in technology. It needs to be involved in the healthcare industries. It needs to be involved with the port. There's just so many different ways we need to do this. People wouldn't even realize just the problem in education. If I were to ask you the question, what high school in this area do you think would have the highest number of homeless students?
Of what students?
Homeless students.
Homeless. Okay.
Okay. You would probably think some inner city school. You maybe would think somewhere in North Pasadena, right?
Sure.
Dobie High School. I'm in an education outreach briefing hosted by the South Bend Ellington Chamber, and I'm listening to the people. I'm looking at the numbers in disbelief that my own backyard, 4 blocks away, Dobie High School, has the highest number of homeless students. There's some fundamental serious problems here because this is a school that's gone from 2,000 to 4,000 students. I want to see industry get involved. We've done this with maritime in all of our industries where we can get maritime involved. We don't want to raise your school taxes, but we want industry to get committed to raise these kids from an 8th grade level through vocational programs, through the degrees, through colleges like San Jack, University of Houston, Clear Lake, so they can come out right now and I can tell you right now for a fact, if you want to get a welding certificate and you're willing to put in overtime, I can virtually guarantee you a 6-figure income right now. I can virtually guarantee that as long as you're willing to show up to work.
Yeah, that's a fact. You mentioned one more.
It's just and gracious me, you know what? I wrote it down right here. The third issue. David, let me tell you this. I apologize, I was a little disorganized in that, but I wanted to click some of my thoughts. Is you get around to areas. The third biggest issue we're having right now that could corrupt this whole system for us is the bigger waters issue, the flood insurance issue right now. I have insurance agents coming to me saying, "Hey, how can you help me solve a problem? How can you help me? I've got a problem here. I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I own insurance companies. I can't get companies insured because of this bigger water issue." I talked to the president of the Clear Lake Chamber. She's telling me I can't afford to live in my house. We have things like what we call the Ike Dike, right? The flood control projects. But there's a lot of ways we can address this. The problem with the Ike Dike is industry doesn't really need it because they're smart. They know how to build, right? They don't get affected by things like Ike. But the Seabrook communities like yours, where you live, Seabrook, Nassau Bay, Webster, they do get affected by these things. That we have to convince the people in the general state of Texas the necessity of not only protecting this area, but additionally, what can we do? And some of the things we're looking at are some of the best practices. What can we get from industry? How can we get people from industry who know how to prevent these issues to sit down with local builders and industries who want to come into this area, how not to be affected by windstorm and flood? How are we going to mitigate these insurance premium raises from the flood insurance issues? It's going to be huge. I don't think many people even realize the impact of what this is going to happen. I don't know maybe what's happened to your own flood insurance, but you see it coming.
I was going to say that that's a very personal issue.
That's
Living in the shore acres, that's very, very personal.
So my thought process was, can we? People raise this to me. Is there something we can do as a state? Is it feasible for us? Maybe we can get the ITEC, maybe we can get the flood control project done. I'm very big on that as well. I like that project quite a bit. But is it feasible for us to set up something like, let's say, $1 billion fund? This is not a giveaway. This isn't something we're putting away, but something where homeowners like yourself can basically borrow money from this fund, and by your reduction in your insurance premium, working with the insurance industry, make upgrades to your home, right? Which will reduce your exposure and risk, which will lower your premium. So how can we come up with a fund or a program where we can bring in best practices for the communities, give them a way to get homeowner assistance money to do this work, upgrade their homes and their facilities, and then in turn, the payback to the state for that fund basically being a reduction of your premiums? What can we do as a state to make sure we don't lose $270 million of investment along our seashores? That's a huge issue right now.
Oh yeah, it's definitely huge along all of these communities on the shoreline in 129. No question about it. We're talking flood insurance rates that most people just can't pay, and so that's really a big issue. So I'm glad you focused on that. What are you? How is it coming? How's the campaign itself coming? It's early, I know that, but do you have any endorsements you'd like to share with us, or any excitement about the campaign, anything like that?
We just had a big kickoff dinner the other day at Mamacita's down in SO1. In fact, I even sent you an invitation to that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I had my granddaughter that night.
oh, I totally appreciate that. In fact, I think, from the first thing, excuse me, from my perspective, I want you to understand that the people in the circles I run in are not people that typically can come out forward and give public endorsements just because of the nature of who they are and where they are. I will tell you, I have people, everybody from the former regional director of the FBI for Galveston and Southern Harris County, all the way to several people that are high-ranking officials in the U.S. military and the U.S. Coast Guard, actively working for me on my campaign in their capacities as civilians. I have the situation where I can't drop names on you like that. Some names I can give you are people like Steve Claycalt, for example. He's the local representative for the Texas Silver-Haired Legislature, who's also on our campaign for the working with the senior citizens. I have been working by people like Bob Mitchell in the Clear Lake Chamber and South Elkin Chamber, and Marie Flickinger, Southeast Arlington Fire Department, Chuck Tilka. They've all been doing yeoman work for me. Sorry about that.
Hey, that might have been a cell you just missed.
That was a fax machine, actually. They have been doing yeoman work. They've been introducing me to all the right people. I've been down with all the economic development commissions. They've been introducing all the committees. What I'm doing is what you learn when you run a previous campaign, is, I know you're aware of this, is when you run your first campaign, you think that endorsements are just the biggest, most important thing you can possibly have on the planet.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of grow up a little bit, okay, and you understand that endorsements, don't really connect with the people that well. What we've done, and I'm going to be publishing a large number of these, of business owners and individuals that people will recognize, who are going to give me 1 to 2 sentences why they're supporting me in this campaign. I have no less than 19 different people right now in local communities, from Middlebrook all the way to Jardín Del Mar, all the way to Green Tea, that are wanting to set up and have community meet and greets. Because they've seen me, they know me through the years, they know my military background, they know the commitment I've made to the community through those works, through my military work, that I'm involved and always have been heavily involved with the community. The one endorsement, what I have to tell you about, that was really funny, though. I did not see this coming. I did not expect this. It came out of left field on me. I was in the, I'm one of the board members of the Lone Star Harbor Safety Committee, which is one of the big Houston port committees. And you have the captain of the port, you have every federal agency that supports this thing sitting there, you have every representative from every major business alliance on the Port of Houston at this meeting. Tom Marion, who's the chairman of the committee, who also worked for Buffalo Marine, gets up and says, he gets up and he says, now this is an unpaid political announcement. I just want to let you know, one of our board members, our alternate board members, Chuck Maricle, is running for House District 129. And because of the importance of this district to the Port of Houston, it would be a godsend, and these are his exact words, to have him elected as state rep, because we need somebody there who understands the port and its issues. The comment I hear from the port is, frankly, one comment, that the federal and the state officials are naive about what goes on down here. And they're dying for proper, educated representation for the single biggest economic engine in this entire state.
Well, there's no question that it's important to the state or 129,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's a very good endorsement.
So
Okay,
we're gonna have a lot of those coming individuals coming on, but I have a very different take on it than I did in the previous race.
yeah, I don't blame you, and I know exactly what you mean by that. So, how can people find out more about you? You have websites, Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that.
I sure do. The website is www.chuckmaricle.com, ChuckMaricle.com. Of course, we're on Facebook. It's Facebook, of course. It's Chuck Maricle. Very simple. Twitter is at Chuck Maricle. Very straightforward there as well. And frankly, go to the Republican Party website. My cell phone number is on the Republican Party website. Call me, 713-240-4929. I'm not much of a state rep. If I can't take your phone call, talk to you for a minute. Okay?
Nothing like a direct touch, right?
Well, there's nothing like the direct touch. I want to just touch on one topic for a second.
Sure.
People forget what the job of the state representative is. I don't think people really even running for office sometimes understand what that is. The job of the state representative is to represent people like you, David, people like Marie Flickinger, the South Bell Chamber, the owner of a gas station down the corner. Regardless of who they are, regardless of what their backgrounds are, regardless of anything about them, if they're running a good, law-abiding, tax-paying business, or there is just an individual that has a concern, and they feel that the state of Texas in some way is not conducting its job properly, their job is to call my office, okay? My job as a state representative or my staff is to investigate their complaint and give them a good 100% honest effort. Ken Legler always did that, okay? He was involved, and that's kind of where I got my ethic even as a leader. It's a true leadership aspect, right? You get engaged, you get involved, and you don't reject the community. And when I talk about reject the community, when I see people, and I'm not talking about just the 129 race, I'm talking about it in general. I would call myself an Ed Emmett Republican. Okay? I'm an individual who's tired of the labeling, who's tired of the lack of cooperation, who very much believes that if I get along with you 80% of the things we agree on, I'm not worried about the other 20%. It's a mission orientation, and I don't care who I have to reach out to get the job done. Because our focus is on this district and our backyard, and that's what's most important. So if I go out there and I campaign on particular topics and issues that creates divisiveness in this community, David, if I didn't, you're wearing kind of a white check shirt with some gray stripes. If I decided that I was in a campaign against people who wore white shirts with gray check stripes, what is your confidence factor that you could call your state representative and feel comfortable explaining a problem that you would get fair representation from it? That is my number one complaint about what's going on in the Republican Party. It's my number one complaint about what's going on in this area, and we've got to get over that. We've got to do what I would call the Ed Emmett thing, and we've got to be focused on the job at hand.
So your goal is to reach all people.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right. Well, thanks, Chuck, for joining us today, and best wishes in your race. And, folks, that's a wrap. Stay tuned for more candidate interviews from BigJollyPolitics.com, and certainly some follow-ups with Chuck as the race goes on. Thanks again. Take care.